Josh Mahoney, thanks for taking the time to join us on the Demonland podcast. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 said we won the trade period, but Terry Wallace gave us a C+. If you're marking your own work, how would you rate our performance during trade week?
First of all, Andrew, Jason, thanks for having me on your show. Everyone's got different opinions on trade periods, and I think you can get caught up looking at everyone's ratings. And in the end, all that we can do is we went into a trade period wanting to address a few things on our list, and we walk away saying that all those have been addressed. And I think I've spoken about previously, we were a bit nervous last year with Max Gawn's our only ruckman. We needed a mature age ruckman to come in and play, and to bring Braden Pruce in was a good for us. Also, we needed some outside run, and 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗁 had been targeted for a period of time, so we think he's able to come in and play that role. And when Jessie was indicating he wanted to return to Perth, we looked at our options, and when we thought that Stephen May was available, we think he's exactly the type of player we need back in our defence. So, in terms of ratings, we think it was a positive trade period for us, and that's all we really look for every year.
To us on the outside, it seems some clubs are almost obsessed with winning individual trades, while others take a more holistic approach and look at the bigger picture. Is that a fair assessment? Are clubs like Essendon harder to deal with?
Oh, you can get caught up during trade period, like you said, trying to win every individual trade. And you see some draft picks get exchanged that people scratch their heads at different times. But I think our attitude through all the trade periods and why we've been able to get deals done is that we look at the trade period in totality. And as I've mentioned before, it's going there with a strategy, who we want to get. We wanted to improve our draft position as well. We're able to do that. So I think you can get caught up if you go trade by trade. Yeah, there's some that people on the outside might say you win. Some people say you might lose in others. But in the end, for us, it's the overall trade period. So, it's an interesting time dealing with some clubs. And some clubs got different philosophies which hold up trades and make them get longer to get done. But that's part of being in a competition with 17 other clubs.
Josh, so much of what happens in trade week is now played out in the media. How accurate is the picture that the fans get through things like trade radio? We heard with the Jesse Hogan situation, we were told that Freo had dropped out of the race. I'm guessing we only hear a small fraction of what's really going on behind the scenes.
Some's accurate and some isn't. And that's probably why it's difficult as a club that you can't get caught in reacting to all the media reports, because once you react to one and say that's not true, when you don't respond, you're almost assuming that it is true. So Our approach is we talk when there's something to say. And yes, we want to keep our supporters and members updated as much as possible, but we certainly don't want to get in giving daily updates as well, because there's a lot of work getting done behind the scenes to get deals done. And there could be times when any sort of media announcement can actually impact the deal getting done. And obviously our supporters and members don't want that. So some are accurate and some aren't. Some clubs like to play things through the media at different stages. Again, we like to just tell things how it is, just be honest if the deals we're looking to get done, but we certainly don't want to give any information that might inhibit a deal getting done or a player of interest.
Speaking about that sort of the backroom stuff, just can you take us through the mechanics of how trade week works? It's a busy week. Are you the only one taking calls and meetings? Who else is in the team, and what does each do? Take the Jesse Hogan trade. You were dealing with Fremantle, but it was also the Gold Coast trade for Stephen May was reliant on that. Who's speaking to who? Is it all just you, or are there other people involved?
No, probably first of all, it's certainly not all me. We've got a team of people doing some work, and the role that I play within that is ultimately a lot of the decisions have to go through me in the role that I'm in. But fortunately, we've got a team of people who are so experienced in their role. Jason Taylor, Todd Viney, Tim Lamb's moved into a really important role with our trade period now. Simon Goodwin, Brendan McCartney's also on our list management team, David Chippendale from finance. So it's a group and a team effort, and we all play our roles within trade period. Mine really is to be represent the club and to be the voice of the club for media and updates, as we've mentioned earlier, and also to be involved in all those sort of conversations with clubs. But Tim Lamb would be our main person, who's the contact with other clubs. So he's the guy doing a lot of the groundwork early days, a lot of the work during the season, along with 𝗨𝗏𝗀𝗀 and Jason Taylor. So a lot goes into the trade week, but a lot of it is about preparation before that week, and conversations have started for next year's trade week already. So planning allows us to get a lot of things done, and that planning happens throughout the year.
When did the club become aware that 𝗟𝗍 might want to go home? And at that point, did you try and persuade him to stay, or did you quickly decide to make the best of the situation and use it as leverage on something else?
There's probably been a conversation at the end of every year with 𝗟𝗍, probably for the last 2 or 3 years, and he's looked at it at different stages, but decided to stay. And for the first time at the end of this year, in a conversation with Simon Goodwin at the end of the year, he indicated that if we could get a deal done, his preference would be to return to Perth. So it was probably then that it was indicated to us. And we said to 𝗟𝗍 all along, as I've said publicly, is we'll see if we can get a deal done, but if we can't, he was happy to stay, and we're happy to still have him as a Melbourne player as well. But as it worked out the best thing for 𝗟𝗍 and for us. The deal was an interesting deal in the end. Probably with Stephen May becoming available, we didn't think he'd be available until another 12 months. And as soon as there was a chance that he may be leaving Gold Coast, that played a role in us and looking to get a deal done with 𝗟𝗍, and the way it all panned out. Yes, we had to wait on other deals, and it was extremely frustrating, but really happy with the result in the end.
It's been said that we'd been interested in May for a while. How far back does that go? Did you have a number of different strategies to try and get him to the club if the Hogan trade didn't eventuate?
Not really for this trade period. We didn't have any other strategies because in the end we knew we had to give up a good pick for Stephen, and we didn't have a first round pick with our trade that we did for Jake Lever last year. So there wasn't really any other strategies to get him in this year, and that was probably a key part as well. That right now he indicated that Melbourne was the club that he wanted to join. You look forward he turns into a free agency next year again, and all the clubs are back in the market. And while we thought we had a competitive advantage this trade period, we thought we had to maximise that. And so that was an important factor for us. But with all players, 𝗨𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗁 was followed from his draft year. He's been up in Gold Coast for 5 years, so our recruiters liked him in his draft year. So that gives an indication of how long we follow players. And if we've done a lot of research on players during the recruiting process, that we already have a fair idea of the type of characters they are. We then would meet with them again post-season, and it probably depends on the player how many years work we've done on it, but it's not something that's brought up at a list management meeting at the end of the year and then we go and do it. There's a lot of planning that goes into that.
Josh, in the final wash-up, we were able to secure a couple of picks in the 20s as well. How important was it to trade up closer to the top of the draft? And is that something you set out with? Is that a goal you set out with, in mind at the start of the trade week?
Yeah, going at the start of the trade period, that was something we wanted. We wanted to get a couple of picks in the second round and potentially move into the first round. But yeah, we think with that range we're in now, with pick 23 and 28, there'll be some good players in that range for us. And our recruiting team have shown to pick some really good players, not only in that range, but in the latter part of the draft as well. So I've got a lot of confidence in the work that our recruiting team do and the type of players they bring in. And you just have to think to last year with 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 and Bailey Fritz being second-round picks. So although we're not promising 18 games and 24 games out of those players, that'll be second rounders. We think they'll be good players within that range for us. And the guys doing a lot of work now on those players. This says something different this year with the draft, the ability to live trading to happen on draft night, which be interesting to see how clubs approach that. And we're certainly prepared for a few different options that might come on that night.
When it comes to the question of taking a punt on a younger player in the draft or going for a known quantity via free agency or the trade table, is there an overarching philosophy that governs the process, or is it all assessed on a case-by-case basis? And does that change depending on where the club is in its cycle, with us arguably being in our premiership window right now?
I'd probably take an hour to answer that question because It's a number of different factors. You've touched on a few of them. If you look at our history of trades and how we've approached the draft over the last 5 years, there was a period when we were down the bottom of the ladder. We had high draft picks that our approach was to maximise our drafting opportunity, and we wanted to get a lot of top 10 picks in, which we were able to do. I think it was about 8 top 10 picks over a 4-year period. And as our team matured, we were able to bring in, that was a lot of the young players, want to get some young talent to come in and play together. And then over the past few years, we've been able to bring some more mature age players. Again, we've been able to trade second round picks at different stages for players like Bernie Vince, Jake Melcham, Sam Frost and Michael Hibbert, to name a few that have come in over that time. So it does change depending on where your list is at. You have to be aware of that. In terms of preferences, we've got a lot of qualities we look for in a player, and we take the date of birth away when we're looking for that. In the end, if it's an 18-year-old that ticks the criteria compared to a 23-year-old, a 28-year-old, we'll just bring those players in if we think can play a role and to help us get better each year.
Josh, just tell us a little bit about Braden Press. It seems counterintuitive that a ruckman looking for more opportunities would go to the club with the game's number one ruckman, but Melbourne must obviously have a plan for him to lure him over. And as you said earlier, Max certainly needs the support.
Yeah, I'm not sure why there's such discussion about it. I always would like to learn off the best in whatever job I'd go into, and that was Braden's approach. He wanted to learn the ruck craft off the best player, and that is Max Gawn at the moment. And when Max caught up with Braden and he was part of our presentation, Max wants to develop Braden as well, and he liked that idea. He liked the idea of having a ruck coach in Greg Stafford to work with him as well. And he's still only a young player. He started late. He was from Queensland originally. He's been in the system now for 3 or 4 years, and he feels like he's still got a number of years of development left in him, and we certainly feel that way as well. What it does give for us is some flexibility and how we want to use Max through the year. He played every game this year, which was a credit to his preparation in his pre-season. But we like the flexibility to be able to play Braden at different stages within the team. There'll be stages where we may play 2 rucks, there'll be stages where Max might play forward for different stages, and we think that Braden gives that flexibility for us. So we thought it was great for the club that he chose to come here, but it's also a real positive move for Braden as well in his development as a ruckman.
Yeah.
Josh, moving away from trade talk and onto a couple of other issues, we've had a spate of foot injuries in the past couple of years. Was that just bad luck, or does the club really need to review things like the surface of Gosh's paddock or the way players were training?
Oh, that's the period we've been in for the last month and a half, really, is reviewing all our programs. And one of the things you look at is injuries, and if there's any trends in injuries. In relation to foot injuries, there has been a trend across the competition, which is not just for us. So it's something that we're looking at, and we think there's a few little triggers that we have to address. But overall, some of it is a bit of bad luck with particular players. You can't really get rid of every injury. Our injuries overall were very good this year. It was probably our injury gains were dominated only by 5 or 6 players, and apart from that, we had a lot of players play every game this year. I think about 7 played every game, and over 13 or 14 played over 20 games for the season to be available either AFL, VFL. So overall, our injuries were very good for the year. It was just some key players that missed crucial times, and that's obviously the main thing that we want with our high-performance team is to get our best players available every game. So part of the review was foot injuries, but that comes into an overall review which looks at everything, looks at where our progress in hamstrings, looks at our progress with our first and second year players, how good it was that they were able to play a number of games. And so that's all part of our reviewing process. In terms of Gosh's paddocks, it's a terrific surface that we've had a period of time, but we play at a number of different venues. So it's all things that are factored into it, and we'd love to have every player available every week. Reality is you're probably going to have 100 injuries for the year, injury games lost, and we got to make sure that we do the best we can to make sure our players are available as much as we can.
Josh, you came to the club in 2008. You've endured the darkest of the dark years along with the rest of us. How was it for you personally to finally see some reward last season? And tell us about your emotions watching and celebrating those 2 finals wins.
Yeah, it has been a interesting time that I've been at Melbourne Footy Club, and it's been personally great for me to to be on that journey with the club, and I've learned a lot through that period. And the opportunity the club first gave me as an assistant coach to Dean Bailey, and then move into administration and to take on the extra roles and responsibilities that I've been able to do each year is it's been great that the club has looked after me in that way. My best moment this year was really standing up probably in the coach's box just before the Geelong game, the first final, and I really enjoyed looking out of the coach's box and seeing a huge crowd there, and predominantly Melbourne, and then to see the excitement on people's faces, and then to see the way we played and the way we attacked the game. It started to show that that's a plan we put in place from 2013, is we wanted to play a tough brand of footy that would stand up in finals. We want to put together a young, exciting list, and that all came together on that night. So it was a really proud moment, but it's only just really the start for us, and we want to be a team that is playing in finals every year, and it's just the start for us. And our approach, basically, since we were knocked out in the final against West Coast, is how can we get better? How can we get better in every area of the club? How can we get our list to be better? How can every staff member get better? And we liked the little taste that we had. It tasted pretty good, and we want to continue that.
So going into the 2019 season, how hard is it going to be to keep the players focused and hungry and not fall into that trap that it's just going to happen? Is that a risk with a young and experienced list?
Not hard at all. The discussions that we had at the end of the season, every player to a man spoke, as I spoke previously, about this is just the start of something, and they see so much improvement in them individually, but also as a team. And if it's an indication of how many players have been coming into the club in this off-season, on Friday we probably had 15 or 16 come in when they're supposed to be on holiday. So if there's any indication already of the way the guys have approached their rehab, either from injury or the way they're approaching their off-season programs, we haven't got any hint of it at all. And, I think everyone from the coaching staff, the off-field staff, recruiters and the players are really keen to make sure that was the start of something. So no hint of that at all, but we certainly want to hit on it if we see it drifting in at any stage into anyone's mindset.
Can you give us a bit of an update on sort of the players who are recovering from post-season operations? Clary's had the two shoulders operated on, and also perhaps Jake Lever's recovery and return.
Yeah, so we had a few post-season operations. I think it was about 13 or 14 in the end. There's quite a few shoulders that were done, and as you mentioned, Clayton Alder had two shoulders. He actually brought forward his second shoulder operation by a couple of weeks just to get him over and done with. And
right.
He's back. He'll be running tomorrow. Will be his first run. A lot of other players, Jack Viney, Christian Petrarca, James Harms, have all started running this week. Billy Stretch as well. So they're all progressing really well. Jake Lever's just going through his different rehab. I think he started running at the end of the season. He's just been progressing his running. In terms of return date, we won't be rushing him back at any stage. So we haven't got real definitive timelines for him, but he's progressing really well and has had no hiccups in his rehab. He'll be going over to America to do an intensive rehab with his knee, similar to what Christian Petrarca did at a similar time through his knee rehab. So he'll be doing that in January. And we think when he comes back from there, he'll be starting to really build up and start doing some more training. So overall, everyone who's had operations are recovering well. And I'd see no one being inhibited in terms of starting any pre-season games or round one, apart from Jake Lever.
Josh, we've got two last questions for you. You spoke earlier about your time as an assistant coach and now moving more into an administrative and oversight role. Can you see yourself in the CEO's job one day? And did you have your hat in the ring to replace Peter Jackson?
Yeah, I think I was part of that process, and it was great to be invited into that process, and good for me to go through it. The CEO role is a different role, and it's football is one component of it, but there's a lot of different elements that you have to understand, and I think that's my approach to my role at the moment as general manager of football. As I like to know a lot of the club things and help out in different ways and understand more. So, yeah, that is a pathway that I may look at taking, but I also understand that my role is also getting bigger every year, The introduction of women's football 3 years ago added another element to the role. We're doing more and more work down at 𝗙cie with our VFL team and our VFLW team. So that, again, is another project to be working on. We've got some work on facilities projects that we're working on. So it's not as if I'm not getting developed and getting new things thrown at me every year. So it's really a perfect role for me now. I love footy. I love talking about footy, and I love business. So, to be able to combine those two things is a perfect role for me at the moment. But I'm still only young in terms of administration, and wrapped to have a period of time under both Paul Roos and Peter Jackson. In terms of mentors, you couldn't find two better mentors. And from the early interactions we've had with a month and a half with 𝗟𝗍𝘀𝗁𝘀, I think we're going to have the same relationship as well. So looking forward to learning more as we go forward.
And one final question for you, Josh, and we could do a whole separate interview talking about your playing days, but you won a flag with the Power in 2004, the pinnacle of a player's career. Where would a Demons premiership fit in relation to that, particularly given where we've come from?
Yes, it's. I don't think you can ever go past being part of a premiership as a player, but I think part of being the premierships is being involved in the whole journey and the pathway there, and to be part of something and to play a role and to see a guy like Nathan Jones or Max Gawn or Tom McDonald, Neville Jetta be part of something, that'd be a really proud moment. And in the end, that is essentially what my role is, to give every player that comes to Melbourne Football Club an opportunity to win a premiership. And that's all the planning that we do. That's why we have the best coaches. That's why we have the best staff and the best programs, is to give them that taste, that ultimate glory, which is a premiership. And it'll be a great moment. But as you know, in this industry, probably by the second interview, we'll be asked about, what about back-to-back? So it turns on pretty quickly. So we'll have to be ready to go again.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. And, go D's. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.